What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk a little bit about Scream 7. I wanted to talk about the idea of releasing or revealing these things, right? These characters coming back versus holding off on it. It's almost like a what-if type scenario, right? Because this is something that I think a lot of us thought as it was going, as they started announcing it. I'm pretty sure I had said in like the Scott Foley video or Matthew Lillard that, what would the world look like, or what, in what kind of world, parallel universes, what would it look like going to the theater and just kind of seeing these people and just seeing them in the film, right? And I kind of want to take a deep dive into that because I think what's really happened since then, much like a lot of things in the Scream fandom, there's been a lot of contention, there's been a lot of fighting with it, and I want to talk about a little of it because I do think some of it is valid points of, okay, the first thing I think people that want to get a little bit aggressive, the first thing I think they go to, right, is desperation. Are they doing this out of desperation? And, this is a little bit different, in my opinion, because this is also kind of a mix of, well, they have to, think of the idea first, right? Like, they have to know that these old ghost faces or the idea of AI and all this stuff, they got to think about that. They got to convince everybody to come back, and then they have to announce it. So almost tough a little bit to discuss, right? But it's kind of two parts, because when people say, okay, there's that desperation, I guess maybe they mean there's desperation in both of them. Like, when you're coming up with the idea, you say, okay, well, we got to go back to the past, back to Sydney, back to all this, and we got to get some of these old ghost faces back. Then there's the other part of potential desperation where they say, okay, we gotta tell people it's going to happen. Okay, to be fair, right? I do think depending on how this plays out, this is maybe what would make me slightly different than other Scream creators. I'm willing to hear it in a because everybody's always just so negative. I feel like in the Scream fandom that I see on social media, or at least on Twitter. If the movie comes out and it's just not good, right? Plainly just not a good film, I think you can look at it and say, okay, it was desperation. They overreacted with the Melissa Jenna thing, and then they tried to swing the pendulum back the other way and say, okay, well, what can we do to bring people in? Well, we can kind of resurrect the past. And by the way, even if it is a good movie, even if a lot of these ideas do work out, which I'm very much hoping and I am rooting for that, that universe to actually play out, it could still actually be rooted in that. I actually think that could be what is very fascinating about this whole situation is, and that's the thing, where I don't think it always has to be all about fighting. I think people can make good points, and maybe they're right without it being all that bad of a thing. Is there actually anything all that wrong, by the way, of thinking about older characters, thinking about how you can make it meta with new age commentary, new technology, and connect the two? Because in all reality, that's probably what you want if you are them, right? You want, okay, yeah, maybe we're afraid that Jenna and Melissa, that's going to lose us people. Now, I personally do not think that's going to happen. We'll talk about that more as we get closer and closer. But I actually think that would be overreacting to say, okay, well, now because we lost them, we're panicking, we have to kind of go and just kind of bring back everybody. If that was the reasoning, I actually feel like that would be a bad decision. But we'll talk about that again when the movie comes out, and we'll talk about that as we get closer, if that actually means anything. But there could be something there, right? You think about AI, you think about this meta commentary nowadays. Yeah, I really think, look, if you have a good idea with new age stuff and it just happens to connect to old stuff, or you can, kind of casually and naturally bridge the two together, why not try it? So, again, generally I'm for this idea because I think you can do some really cool stuff with it. But okay, now again, what would the world look like if you didn't announce them? Well, I think the thing you would probably run into, which I actually was just thinking about this recently, the one major issue most likely is the trailer, right? Is the marketing leading up. Because if the entire movie is based off this idea of AI and based off this idea that they want you to believe that characters are returning. Now, as I've talked about in the past, you do have to be careful with that because generally I think the idea is they're not alive, and I don't know how much you want to push it. I don't know how much you want to say, okay, Stu's alive, oh, he's actually not alive. I feel like most people would assume he's not alive, so to push it too far, I feel like might actually be the wrong decision, right? But anyway, you go into this movie and you see Stu, you see, any of these characters, whether, Jill, if she's in it as a cameo, whatever. You see these characters, I just feel like this would be the greatest thing of all time to not know it ahead of time. And again, I think that quickly folds into, much like this entire video has, well, why do you make those decisions, right? Because, honestly, at the end of the day, to make the point really quickly, I think it would have been a better idea to hold off and not announce that kind of stuff. But it depends on like what the movie is about. If the trailer is about that stuff, and if that's what the movie is about, you can only hide it so much. You know what I mean? Plus, I mean, to be honest, you don't want the idea, or you don't want the leak that one of these people is filming. You don't want that to come out. Could you imagine if somebody said, okay, well, Scott Foley or Matthew Lillard, somebody, any of those two, or if there's other, returning ghost faces, could you imagine somebody leaking that? As we've seen, people are leaking things like every other day in the Scream fandom. Could you imagine if that leaked if they didn't announce the casting? So, in a lot of ways, I understand it. I understand why you would do something like this. I also think that, like I said earlier, if these things kind of come naturally, and by the way, done well, I don't think it hurts it too much. Again, in a alternate universe where you go in and you see Stu and you had no idea Stu was in the movie, and by the way, the whole purpose of the movie is trying to convince you that he's back, and then he's in the movie, and you didn't know that going in. I think that'd be like the greatest thing of all time. In a way, I very much envy, by the way, people that aren't into this kind of stuff, right? People that are just very casual. So while those people don't have the same attachment and maybe not the same like enjoyment of it, they are going in, much like they probably do with a lot of films, completely blind. And I kind of envy, that kind of feeling to it to a degree. But again, I hope this is the situation I hope for, right? Just because we know it's coming does not mean we know how it's going to be executed. And maybe that's a coping mechanism I use, but I use it a lot. I use it in gaming. I cover so much stuff, gaming, movies, whatever. Just because you see something in a trailer, just because you see a video game or whatever, you see a part to it, does not mean you know how it's going to hit when it's all coming together. And that's the opportunity, I think, of the film to deliver. So I will say, even though, again, I would take the opposite. I would take, in a great universe, I would actually choose to not know that these characters are coming back. I don't know if that's plausible. I don't know if you could actually pull that off with the trailer, with the lead-in, with worrying about leaks and stuff, but I would prefer that. But at the same time, just because we know it does not, I think, take away from the end result, right? When this stuff ends up happening, it's going to be on the movie to kind of deliver. Just because we know that Matthew Lillard is in it, even if you know specific scenes that he's in, there's a difference between hearing about it and then kind of seeing it on screen, and that's for the actors, that's for the writers, directors, all that jazz. So I'm still very excited, but I kind of just want to have this conversation. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.